guys. Welcome to episode 7 of Astrology with Anna. I'm Anna Ferster, and this is Astrology with me. So for today's episode, I'm going to be talking about Pluto, the planet Pluto. I was going to talk about the houses of a birth chart, but I'm still kind of working on that episode, trying to figure out what to talk about, what's more important to talk about, that kind of stuff. I want to keep things interesting. So I'm putting that on the back burner right now. But I really wanted to talk, I really thought, what could I talk about? And I was like, I could probably talk about Pluto, because I think I have some very interesting thoughts on Pluto right now, coming from my own experience with having a Pluto transiting over one of my planets. And so that's kind of just what I wanted to talk about. What I wanted to share some knowledge, I guess, on Pluto. I don't think people take Pluto seriously enough, very honestly. I think because it's the slowest moving planet in the zodiac. They don't look at it as something where it's like you look at your personal planets, or you look at, your ascendant, you look at certain house degrees or whatever, and you think that's more important. But generational planets, when they touch your personal placements, when they touch certain house cusps, they can wreck your shit, and they can mean a lot. And so there's a lot of points in your life in which you have these generational planets, Pluto, Uranus, Neptune, Saturn, and Jupiter, touching different points of your chart, or you have natal, natural placements in which, say for instance, if you have a sun conjunct Pluto, or a moon conjunct Pluto, or a Venus conjunct Pluto, or any other, not transits, what am I thinking? Aspects. I'm thinking of the word aspects, but when you have certain aspects like that, but it can be really intense, and it can be a really intense time to have generational planets conjunct or touching in any kind of aspect your personal planets. And so what I wanted to talk about was my experience dealing with the transiting Pluto oppositioning my Cancer sun, and how it's been a very stressful and very hard time throughout these last 4 years, and probably the next potentially year and a half that I deal with this very actively, until it eventually makes its way, where Pluto makes its way to oppositioning my Mercury. But I wanted to talk about that, and I also just wanted to kind of but just sharing information on Pluto and how it can really deeply affect whatever house it's in, or whatever house it's oppositioning or aspecting, or any planets it's oppositioning, squaring, trining, sextiling, or conjuncting, and how it can be a crazy freaking time. So I want to start out with that. First, I want to go over the fact that Pluto has been in the sign of Capricorn for the last 15, 16 years. So it's been a minute. Every year that goes by, it's about 2 degrees. So 2 degrees a year is about 29, 30 degrees, which is the full arc of a sign. And so this started around probably 2008, 2007, where Pluto entered Capricorn from Sagittarius. But now, after that 15, 16 years, it's now entering Aquarius. It's entered Aquarius a few times since 2023, but because of retrograding, it's retrograded back into Capricorn a few times. But this year, it's going to be officially in Aquarius, and going to be in Aquarius for the next 16 years. And what's really funny about Pluto being Capricorn is, back during COVID, it conjunct Pluto in a Capricorn, and this was at about, I think, 25, 26 degrees, or somewhere around that, was conjunct both Saturn and Jupiter, which were also transiting the sign of Capricorn. And so it made this big, very rare conjunction. And this is not something you see very often. This happens maybe every 100 years or so. It's, timelines where all those planets just kind of conjunct all together because Pluto's so slow. And then Jupiter and Saturn usually keep in line with each other pretty decently, but they also, move faster than Pluto. So this is not a common occurrence at all. And so when that happened in the sign of Capricorn, at the same time, COVID happened. So when this conjunction was happening in March, COVID had just started. So COVID had been around since, I think, November and slowly made its way into the United States and most of the world. And so by March, everything was closed down. Lockdown was happening. And a lot of astrologers at this time were looking at this this really big transit with all these 3 generational planets, and they were saying something big's going to happen. Something intense is going to happen. And then what happened? COVID happened. And so whenever Pluto touches a sign, whenever Pluto touches a sign, whenever it touches other planets, whenever it transits certain houses, whatever, it completely transforms, it completely changes, and it completely shifts control of a planet, of a house, of society. Like with COVID, so much stuff happens. It's just kind of showing the utter shift that's about to happen. And so when I talk about Pluto in my chart, I have I don't know if this is significant placement, but when you have any planet at like 29 degrees, it's the very last degree that you can be at in a sign. And so it's a big thing going from 29 degrees to 0 degrees into a new sign. It's a complete and utter transformation. And so I have a Cancer sun at 29 degrees Cancer. And Pluto has been transiting the later degrees of Capricorn, which Capricorn oppositions Cancer. And then it also squares Libra and Aries alongside Cancer that also squares Libra and Aries. And so I've been going through this placement in my mind very realistically, just kind of calculating all my consistent, struggles that have been pretty, all the things that I've noticed. Oh, that's been here for a while. This has consistently happened month to month. I've kind of tracked that since COVID. I've been like, hey, like all these placements oppositioning my sun are still very close to my sun, within 4 degrees of each other. So this is definitely starting to deeply affect me, or just showing that my life is going through a big freaking change, which it has been for the last 4 years since COVID happened. And I would say even before, but when you're talking about an opposition here, when you're talking about Pluto oppositioning any point in your chart, it's not a good kind of change for the most part, sadly. It's not. It's really, there's no way to sugarcoat that. This is not saying like negative things will happen to you. No, that's not saying that. It's just saying uncomfortable change that will probably be around for a while. And so that's what's been happening with me, where I've been going through a lot of uncomfortable change for the last 4 years. COVID started to happen. COVID was very hard on me. I think obviously it was very hard on everyone. But the reason I consider it to be very hard on me just in the long run was because when I went to college, COVID hit me right during college. I was in a pretty good place where I was becoming more extroverted. I was becoming more of a people person. I was really getting involved in school and doing more things. And I was giving myself more of a schedule, more of a life to get involved in outside, because before I went to college, I was very much an introvert. I was very much not a people person. I would not consider myself someone who would just go out and do things and go try to meet people and hang out and have fun, go out, stuff like that. I would not do that. And I can say some of it was because I didn't really know how to drive until I was 18. I lived in a pretty reclusive area from my town, so there was no way to walk anywhere. There was no way to get around anywhere. And so when I went to college, that was really changed. I was able to walk wherever I wanted, because campus was very walkable. I even lived next to a train station that could go right into New York City. It was great. And then when COVID happened in the middle of my sophomore year in college, my life was completely altered. It was completely altered, along with everyone else's. But I think for me, it was definitely something in which I felt like I was changing in a good direction, and I was doing a lot for myself. And then COVID happened, and that consistent amount of change was put on pause, which I think really put a toll on me mentally. And I'll get into that mental aspect later because it plays a part in my chart, but it could also help you if you have similar placements. And so for the next 4 years, I went through a crap ton of stuff that was, in essence, in total, out of my control. The biggest thing when I talk about Pluto and specifically making an opposition is just the fact that you're going to be dealing with a certain amount of not having control, or the majority of your dealings will have you not have much control. An opposition with Pluto is just basically talking about a lack of control. It's oppositioning you. It's not up close, but it's keeping you stood still. It's like almost like a standoff. Like in an old Western where you're both on opposite sides, and if you move, one of you will get shot. And with Pluto, if you move with this opposition, you're the one who's going to get shot. And that's just kind of how that's sadly how the transit works, where it's just like you have to deal with with the majority of your dealings and not having much control with that, and being able to work with what little control you still do have, and try not to go insane, try not to get too hard on yourself, try to grab onto control because that will make things worse, all those things. But with my experience, I dealt with a lot of things where it was just like I lost a lot of friends during this time. I got a lot of opportunities, but they were they were so different to how I would have expected them to be. I got internships, but again, they weren't in person, and they kind of struggled because they weren't in person. Let's see. I would consider a lot of the bad things continuing when I graduated out of college. I didn't have a car for 6 months out of graduating college. I think a little bit more than that, because the first few months I had a car, but then I didn't have a car. I had to stay, and I still kind of do stay with my boyfriend, because I couldn't live at home because there were too few opportunities where I lived. So I have and continue have to staying with my boyfriend because he lives closer to New York. He lives closer to a lot more stuff that's happening. I kind of had to sadly give up my room. This is a friend's room, but I had to give up having a room. Growing up, I shared a room with my sister my entire life. And then when COVID happened, the one good thing was I got to live with my grandmother, who has extra bedrooms. And so I was able to have a room, besides like in college, for the first time in my life. And because there were so little opportunities in where I lived, I had to move in with my boyfriend and share a space, which I think for a Cancer is extremely hard to just share. It's not even just sharing, it's really just like you have to give up your own space. You have to collide everything. Not everything's gonna look nice and pretty. Things usually get messy very easily. You don't have your alone time as much. It's a struggle, and it definitely. And I feel like what I'm saying is like so simplistic, and I'm making a big deal out of small things. There is much I'm not talking about. But trust me when I say this is a very tough placement. I wouldn't lie. I wouldn't say junk about it for nothing. This is a very hard placement to have. I think at any point in your life when you have Pluto over top or transiting or aspecting any of your planets, or if it's natal, if it's just transit, whatever, it's a tough time. It's not easy. And I just want to share more information about that. And so one thing I have learned about having this transit happen to me overall is two things. One, when it's, like I said, when Pluto is making an opposition to a house, or specifically, especially one of your planets, one of your personal planets, you're dealing with a lack of control. And the only thing that can make things better, the only thing that can really put you on a better course from what's happening, is to release that need to control. So kind of just give up control and take things as it comes, and then control the little things that you still can control. So there will be a lot, if you ever do deal with this. I know I have some friends who will probably be dealing with this very soon, because they're Leos, or have Leo placements. But it's really accepting that you can't control what's happening to you, and you just kind of have to deal with it. And that's the hardest part, being like, because for me, all I want to do is change things. All I want to do is fix things. All I want to do is make things better for myself. My son is in the 6th house, so all I want to do is be able to give myself a schedule. All I want to do is be able to find a new job and get more structure that way. All I want to do is attempt to better my life, work on my health, that kind of stuff. That's all I want to do. But the world is being like, that's not, there's going to be a lot of roadblocks. And those roadblocks are ultimately, it's like for transformation. But in reality, in the moment, it's all roadblocks. And so when you have this placement, you're just dealing with a lot of shit, and you just kind of have to be like, okay, I guess this is what I deal with at the moment. And that's basically it. It's being like, you don't have control, and you will have to deal with no control, or a large amounts of no control, until this ends. And then you'll be okay. For me, I think for the most part, it will be fine. Until eventually, because I have a Mercury in Leo in an early degree, so that's going to start being affected. I probably should not go or attempt to go back and do any schooling during this time, so that is definitely noted. I don't think I was, but just something to keep in mind. If you have like a Mercury and Leo in any early degrees right now, like within 5 or 6 degrees, don't go to graduate school. Wait until that transit's over. Or try to get it done now before it gets really heavy. Because Mercury deals with learning, it deals with taking in information, and that would not be good. But I luckily will not have much to worry about until then. And then again, until I do have a Leo North Node, so that will be kind of a stressful time, potentially, when Pluto conjuncts your South Node. We're just going to hope for the best here. But then on the other side of the spectrum, you have, for Aquarius placements, so for Aquarius Sun, any of the personal placements, you have Pluto conjuncting your Sun. So what does that mean? If oppositioning means dealing with a lack of control and not trying to take control at any time, what does the opposite mean? The opposite means is that you have control and that you need to take more control. Not over other people, not over other people's lives, over yourself. Gotta always remind that. Over yourself. Or whatever area. So like, people think, oh, if Venus, Venus talks about relationships. If I have Venus and Aquarius conjunct Pluto, does that mean I take more control over my relationship? It's like, you don't control the other person. You say, I'm going to go date more. I'm going to go take more chances in my relationship. Like, take us to new places, do this. If you have Venus and Aquarius, it might be a rough time relationship-wise, because there's going to be just a lot of, regardless, Pluto, whatever it touches in whatever way, there's always going to be transformation. So there will be things transforming about how you look at relationships, about how your relationships are, all that kind of stuff. But taking more control, being more, or better to say, being more active in your pursuits in whatever planet in whatever way Pluto touches is the best way to deal with it. To not take a back seat, but to take a front seat or just be the driver. Being the driver is probably the best thing. It's to stop being the main force in your life is the best way to deal with this. Being the main force going forth in your life. And it's also, if you have other people controlling you in your life actively, it's a point of overtaking that role. Like I said, being the force in your own life again. Taking those people away, pushing those people away, or just getting rid of them so you can be the main person in your own life again. It's the axis of control. And so when you look at those placements in the houses, so if you look at, I'm going to phrase it like this. I'll phrase it like it is in my chart. So I've been dealing with with Pluto transiting over my 12th house in Aquarius. And I'll eventually go into the first house because I have an Aquarius rising and it will get into there too. But right now it's transiting over my 11th house or 12th house and it's oppositioning my 6th house. So with my sun in the 6th house, my career has been shit. It has been shit. I have been overworked multiple times. I've been fired for no reason. I've been dealing with a lot of shit. In terms of my schedule, I have had no schedule. I've been dealing with the fact that I can't ever get onto a schedule, no matter how hard I try. And it's freaking frustrating. It's annoying because I'm a person who thrives on structure, who thrives on a routine, who thrives on getting up early, who thrives on knowing what she's going to do with her day. I thrive on that. 6th house suns, this is how we work. And so with freaking Pluto ruling over my whole life, oppositioning my sun, oppositioning my 6th house, I'm not able to get almost anything done. It's like sometimes with this podcast, I'll have an idea in my head that I really like, that I want to talk about, but there will always be a struggle of how should I talk? What should I talk about? Should I talk about it in this way? Should I go from a historical perspective? Should I go from a more active, more from, just the noggin perspective? But it gets hard. It gets really hard because I'm just like, sometimes I just have to do what I'm doing now where I'm just talking about something I'm passionate about and that's all I can do. And sometimes I have to plan out an episode, which becomes, and it's been a struggle because the last few episodes they've just taken longer because I want to put in more research, but then research takes longer and then you want to add sources and you have to source everything and you have to add in that. But it has been worth it. I can say it's always been worth it, but it's a struggle. It's the fact that sometimes you just feel so out of control that you're not able to grasp onto anything. And that's just kind of how it's been with Pluto. And then you look on the other side of the spectrum, it's conjuncting my 12th house. It's not conjuncting at this point, but it's in my 12th house. Pluto is over my 12th house. It's giving me more control of 12th house things. So mental illness. I have gone to therapy. I have started therapy within the last year. Very positive. But it's also like I have more control of losing myself. Like when I say control, I don't mean in some ways it can mean you take control over yourself. But like it's also control in a way of things can control you. So that's really, when you're talking about Pluto conjuncting something, it's something can either control you or you can control it. So the only way to get through a Pluto conjuncting a certain aspect is to allow yourself to take control over the thing that's controlling you. So for instance, all the 12th house themes of like bad mental health, of going into addictions, of like submerging yourself into addiction, into escapism, into karmic things. If you don't allow those things, if you don't take control of those things, then it will control you. And so that's been a struggle. Because again, another thing, I have a South node in the 12th house. It's already karmic. It's already extra karmic for me, dealing with that stuff. And so I do fear for the day that Pluto conjuncts. Maybe I'm hoping what that means is that that's the time in which I really start controlling my karmic shit. But that's the hope. That's the hope. We'll see, I guess. I'm hoping, because that will be a while. That will be about 12 years from now until that starts, maybe a little less until that starts hitting. But we're going to hope. But again, it's a struggle because you're kind of learning to control certain things. With a Pluto transit, you're learning to take more control of other things. And then you're learning to take less control of the things, especially things that you might want to control. Like for me, since my sun is in the 6th house, I want to control my career. I want to control my schedule. I want to control my health. But sometimes you have to give up that control and just let things come as they may, which is a freaking struggle when you have placements in the house that Pluto is oppositioning. So, when it comes to Pluto, one thing I would definitely, for one, if you have any Aquarius, any Taurus, any Leo, any, what's the last one? Scorpio, in early degrees, or just in general, because say you want to plan for the future, I would say start looking at your chart. I'll look at myself, right? Right now, Pluto's oppositioning my sun. It's going to be oppositioning my Mercury. And my Mercury is in the 6th house too, so it's going to revolve themes around that. And then eventually, it's going to opposition my North Node, which is in the 7th house, and then it's also going to deal with themes around that. And at some point too, Pluto, just after my North Node, it's going to be oppositioning my Descendant. So those are things and those are themes I have to start looking at. For you, I would just say whatever placements you have that Pluto is going to opposition, conjunct, or square. I would also say looking at trine and sextile, but I'm not going to talk about those because to me, those are not the most detrimental placements to have. They're a bit more positive and depending, although when you talk about trine and sextile, things can either be really positive or it can show moments of when you become lax. So those are the two things. But I'm not going to be talking about that right now. I'm mainly just going to talk about opposition and conjunction and maybe a little bit of square. Or that's what I have been talking about. But I would look at what the house is. If there's multiple houses, Aquarius will opposition, square, like saying like if you have not Taurus, if you have Leo placements like me, but some of them are in the 6th house, some of them are in the 7th house, that's like cusping, where it's just like sometimes, depending on what your ascendant degree is, sometimes other planets can be in other houses while being in the same sign or whatever. Just pay attention to what house everything is in, or houses everything is in. Pay attention to what your planets are that are going to be aspected by Pluto. Degrees too, because degrees allow you to know exactly when things are going to happen. And so this is also something that people don't realize, or a lot of people I've met don't realize this. The reason astrologers can predict certain dates or certain time frames about how or when your life will change or when things will happen is because they look at degrees. What astrologers are able to do is when they see that a certain sign is going to be in a certain degree, and say you have a sign or you have a planet in that sign that is at the same degree, they can tell something might happen to you at that time or around that time. Degrees just allow people to see, it does tell more information. There is something called degree theory, but also it allows you to make predictions and allow you to see when parts of your life will change and when things will shift. So to end this episode, I just want to say, I don't know if all my thoughts were completely coherent. I think they were. But just to wrap up my thoughts, Pluto can completely, show complete change and transformation in your life. It can show times in which you have control, and it can show times in which you don't have any control. And so it's really important to look at when Pluto is transiting certain houses or oppositioning certain houses or conjuncting, oppositioning, squaring certain planets to know how to deal with certain parts of your life or what parts of your life show no control and show more control. So with my experience of having a Pluto opposition my Cancer sun, there are points in your life, for some people, not all people, where you'll just be having to deal with a long period of no control. And the best way to deal with a Pluto opposition is just to take things as they are and to change what little things you can. Change the changeables, as I heard it once, which is actually a really good phrase. So yeah, when it comes to Pluto moving into Aquarius, look at your chart. Do you have Aquarius placements? Do you have fixed placements? Do you have a north node or south node in a fixed sign, especially too for people born around 1998 to 2000, around the time I was born? You probably do. So I would look into that, look at what parts of your life can potentially transform everything, because Pluto is underrated and Pluto will sneak up on you. And to any listeners, to anyone who's a Leo or an Aquarius or has fixed placements or is just coming out of a Pluto opposition or conjunction or square themselves, it's better to... It makes things easier when you're aware of what's going on. It makes things easier because maybe it will allow you to take less control and just to kind of take things as they are. Even if they're upsetting, change just needs to happen. And I think that's the interesting part of looking at Pluto is when, or just charts in general, we can see what's about to happen. And you can at very least prepare for it, which is good too. But you can give yourself some ease in a really hard placement, which is something I definitely needed 4 years ago, or in the last 4 years, and something I'm trying to do until it leaves oppositioning my sun, which hopefully, well, the impact will end soon. So yeah, I hope this episode was a good one. I've been thinking about this for a while, and I could always talk about it more coherently. I just really wanted to put out an episode, be more active on here, because it's just one of the goals I want to stay with, really. I really do. And yeah, hopefully next week's episode is on the houses. If it's not, it will be on something else. It will be on something else. But yes, I hope you liked this episode, and I will see you alongside the stars in the next one. Bye-bye.